Okay, rather than having you watch me suffer through another Blitz game or something else, let's do more of an informative game. So how about the King's Gambit using Morphy versus Andersson in 1858 as an example. Pretty much the opening of this is going to be the same even in the modern day. E4, E5, F4 is the King's Gambit now. If black is going to be nice, and if black wants to have any kind of fun, black will accept the gambit and take with e takes f4. You can see there are other possibilities. The knight could just come here. If you want to do the, what's it called? Some sort of counter gambit. I can't pronounce the name. Then you would play the pawn d5. Bishop to c5, I think, is a declined King's Gambit. That's pretty drawish, maybe. I know a good player on the free internet chess server was once talking about how that's the move you should play if you want to play an anti-King's Gambit, and so on and so forth. But we'll be looking at the King's Gambit accepted. And from here, there are two main choices. We just saw in what was the tournament called? With Carlsen and Ivanchuk and all those guys. Oh, no, it wasn't that tournament. It was with the Blitz match between Kasparov and Nigel Short. Nigel Short played Bishop c4 here, which is kind of Robert Fischer's favorite way to play the King's Gambit. Kind of more common, maybe knight f3, because people sometimes understand it more. If you play bishop c4, then the queen can come in to h4, check the king. King has to move. All sorts of stuff is happening that almost doesn't look that great for white, when in fact it's probably just as good as knight f3. It's another fun alternative, but not one we'll be talking about today. So knight f3 is the main thing that people do in the King's Gambit. Again, you see all these different possibilities for black. Personally, I play at this point the Fischer defense, which is d6, and interestingly enough not listed among these possibilities. Again, these aren't just possibilities, these are possibilities and future moves. So like you see a g5, g4 as two arrows, because these are all the different things can happen. Anyway, maybe the most common response for black if he's into the King's Gambit mood is g5. And g5, if we want to play in the old style here, we'll play h4. Another alternative could have been maybe bishop c4. But h4 is kind of asking black what he wants to do. He kind of put g5 there maybe to protect his extra pawn on f4. But he could also use it to kind of go on the offense here and maybe do something of his own to kind of say, okay, white, you have your development of pieces, but now I'm just going to start attacking you and messing up your king side and opening up holes to your king so that when I finally fend off your attack, you'll be dead. That's maybe the idea. So black will continue with g4 until the knight, you've got to go somewhere. Alright, so this is still basically the main line of the King's Gambit. I think it's the main kind of line for the King's Gambit that most people play. And here the knight has some choices. Where can you run? You can, I mean, going backwards isn't really the best option. Going here is just going to block the pawn. So it's really kind of between g5 and e5, and here e5 is the main way to go. There are other alternatives. For example, if white wants to be super aggressive, white can sack the knight and just start developing, but that's usually not with h4. That's usually after a bishop c4, castle, let black take the knight, take with the queen, and then you have tons of pieces out, black holes, and no development for black. But in this case, we'll just play kind of the most rational sort of thing. Knight e5 and say, okay, I'm threatening to take your pawn. So what does black do from here? In the game Morphy versus Andersson, Andersson played knight f6. It's the most common in my Fritz 10 database here, and kind of gives a question to white. So what are you going to do? You're threatening my pawn, and sure, you can take it, But if you take it, I'll take your pawn back, so I'll still be a pawn up. Other things that could happen is maybe white would just worry about defending the pawn straight away and play something like knight c3. But interestingly enough, in the opening book, the ways white usually plays is with bishop c4 or with d4. Just that's because the King's Gambit is all about attack, development, and doing interesting stuff. It's not about defending your pawns and playing some sort of conservative chess. It's being aggressive, and you're going to see that real soon. So Morphy decided to take the pawn. Black took his pawn, and in this case, then Morphy pushed the knight away somewhere. Well, did he push him away, or did he just give him like a really great attacking ability? Now, if the knight goes to g3, which it did in the game, the rook is attacked. White's certainly not going to castle kingside, and now the rook would be in some awkward area, right? So that's kind of weird, but Morphy says, screw that. I'm just going to continue the development because that's the romantic style. That's what the King's Gambit is all about. And I'm going to bring out more pieces. You can have a rook. The rook is nothing. I'll take your knight back eventually. But look at what happens now. So black takes the knight, and white will go queen e2 check. And white has 3 pieces developed. Black has, you could say 1, but that 1 is going to die at some point. There's nowhere to run, and its job is done. It's won the rook. So white has given up pawns, opened up his king, given away a rook, all in exchange for these 3 pieces out and ready to do something, to do some attacking on the black king, and a little bit of weakening in the black position. So how is black going to defend? Well, bishop e7 to block isn't going to be the best idea. Maybe you can spot it if we check. Again, you can't take the knight because then you're in check. So the king has to move, and then we have checkmate. So that's not the way to go for black. Black has only the one move, queen e7. Alright, still the same theme now. White plays knight f6 check. Here again there's only one move, only the one move is to d8. And maybe you'll notice another tactic that's sort of interesting. By the way, this is being evaluated at 0.00, so that's kind of hilarious when you think of the material imbalance and the way everything is balanced, especially after bishop takes c7 check, and only one move, have to take it, and then now you're forking king and queen. So the king retreats, win the queen, and this is 0.00. Even though white has given up a rook, black has given up a queen, everybody's position is exposed, neither of the kings are castling kingside, and black can't castle anywhere. So this is the kind of a fun thing you get out of the King's Gambit. And sure, it's being evaluated pretty much as even, but white is the one attacking. Black still isn't anywhere near to be attacking and won't have any attacking chances this entire game. So that's what the King's Gambit is about. It's you give your opponent some sort of material advantage and maybe the opportunity to win overall in the longer term, but for the first half of the game you'll be attacking like crazy, and it's up to black to survive the attack to try to win in the end. Alright, so queen g4, d6 now attacking the queen. Queen has to move. Makes sense to defend the 2 squares that the knight can run away at and attack a defenseless pawn. So black responds by putting the rook on an open file. Queen takes. Bishop takes check, so the king's got to run. And now you're thinking, well, maybe the knight will be able to escape at some point, and maybe, we'll see. We'll see. The rook now comes to a more promising file. Also open, but this time open all the way and closer to where it can be doing some damage to the king. You notice this blue arrow pointing the rook to e1 where the bishop covers, or the bishop can come here and check, and the king will maybe be running off where he can be attacked. So maybe black is on the attack. Is that true? Maybe not so much. So black has to get some pieces out. And right here, knight a6 is probably a fatal error. Maybe you can spot the problem. So it's one of the orange arrows, I can give you that much. If white plays queen h5, immediately there's a problem. Both the bishop and the knight are attacked, essentially. You are going to lose one if you're black. And so white's going to get a piece right here. And I mean, that's the main thing. So if white decides to save, or black decides to save the bishop and attack b2, which makes sense, then white wins the knight on h1. So win b2, white doesn't need to defend the rook immediately. We can put the king in check and get ourselves into a more favorable position. You'll see what's going to happen just in a second. Because it does look like black has forked the knight and the rook, but it's not exactly the case. So we decide to save the rook with rook b1, and black decides to take the free knight. Well, that's not going to be helpful either, because there's another sort of fork happening with queen a4 check, and now the bishop will be mopped up. And I guess I don't really have to go any farther. This video is probably long enough. The main point was the opening and how white is basically the only one on the offensive, and the only one with any chance of being on the offensive in a proper King's Gambit. Very aggressive, sacrificing, attacking. Black has to survive the opening middle game period and might have a good chance after that, but there's also a good chance he won't survive the middle game period. In this case, once everything's mopped up, there's really no attacking chances for black. The king is actually pretty well situated where he is on d2. The rook, queen, and bishop of white is just going to be overmatching anything that black can offer. So if we wanted to go any further so the king can move out of the way, we'll mop up that piece, maybe try to get this guy somewhere useful. There's really no hope. There's no reason to keep going. So anyway, this was a King's Gambit, pretty much the main line. I'm not sure if I actually know the name of the line. And I can recap perhaps by going back to the beginning. f4, e takes f4 is the King's Gambit. Knight f3 is sort of one of two main forks in the King's Gambit that white can take. This is the main line for black and white mainly. And this particular game between Morphy and Anderssen in 1858 allowed us to see what would happen in the case of knight f6 and knight takes g4. So it was a fun game. I hope you use this to consider the King's Gambit. Maybe we'll talk more about some particular defenses and tactics and ideas, except for beyond this sort of general overview. But take a look and see how you like it. Thank you.